Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're on now. Lisa, I believe, is driving, but otherwise she will. I'm assuming you were gonna chair the meeting, Lisa.
Yeah.
Okay. Just
Mm.
So
I know you're driving, but just so you understand, Ron Eichner is on and Andrea Rosen is on in addition to the four of us.
okay.
Okay.
So good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
It is good evening, 7:01. I'll call the meeting to order. So me and Peter had a discussion about what should we kind of discuss and go over in this meeting. We just got probably about an hour or so ago, Commissioner Sherman's questions. I just got off a boat cruise, so I didn't get a chance to see that. I don't know if ever, I know Commissioner Gosselin just got through reading some of it, very brief. Jim, I don't know if you had a chance to look at those, but I figure regardless of where we are, not everyone has seen them. So I don't think we'll, have too much discussion on that tonight. What I did want to discuss is the interviews that were conducted, and see if you guys could give an overview of the Chevy Chase Voice and Ward 3 Vision interview and your feedback on it. And then next steps for next week, because I think starting next week, we probably need to meet twice. Maybe we could do Tuesday and Thursday. That'll give us time to go over Bruce's questions and start combining and editing. I did get a call from Jill's while when did Jill's call? Wednesday? What's today? Tuesday? Monday. Maybe he called yesterday. It's so much going on. I'm losing track, and I've been down here relaxing so much. I'm definitely losing track of time. But I do believe it was yesterday. And he threw some dates to me in October for the first our RFP meeting. And I believe they're looking at, and I don't have a calendar in front of me, the second week of October for the first meeting, and then the following week for the second meeting. So we do have a little bit more time because we were thinking end of September, 1st of October, but it looks like we are going to have the first meeting the second week, if I'm not mistaken, second or third week of October. I just don't want to give you guys the wrong date. And he has not finalized that date. He's waiting to hear back from the Chevy Chase Presbyterian Church to get confirmation of the dates. So we do have a little bit more time. Brandon, can you hit okay on that? So that's good. But if you guys are okay, commissioners, with the agenda for tonight, I would definitely love to hear, because I did not participate in either organizational interviews, and I'll talk more about that at some later point in time. But I would definitely love to hear what took place, and I'm sure members of the community would as well. And then set up our schedule for next week.
Is that acceptable to Jim and Bruce?
I will be leaving the country on the 31st of August, which is Thursday of next week. So my last time to meet with you all will be a week from today, if as it stands now.
Okay.
So Lisa and colleagues, just a quick question. Are we still thinking that we would like to do the field test in the next 2 weeks? Is that on our schedule? Because we need to be thinking about how we, and I know we've talked about this a bit before, but we need to come back to how we're going to construct that sample and undertake that test.
That would be nice, but I mean, we're a week behind. We can't move any any much further until we get through these questions, and that's going to take us some time. So I think Peter had a good suggestion with doubling up on our meetings. If we can meet again, Peter thought this week, I don't know if people are up to meeting I can't meet on Thursday because I'm hosting something for Wendy, who's running for that shadow Senate seat. So I can't do that. And the only other day we would have is Friday. I don't know if, people are amenable to meeting on the weekends, but I'm also going to be out this weekend because I got to get Brandon up to Philly. So the only day I would be able to meet is Friday. Other than that, doubling up next week. And Jim, I know you'll be gone, but you can give us obviously your input that last meeting and then before you head out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think we need to get our questions finalized and see where we are with that before we maybe can even think about the testing part.
Well, let me suggest this, because the testing can await finalization of the questions, obviously. But in terms of what the process looks like and how the field test is designed, let me suggest we ask our consultants to give us their recommendations on that.
Okay, well, let's do this first, Bruce. I want to proceed with, and my question was, let's leave this in the car. The question is you guys giving us an overview of what happened. So let's proceed with that. And then next step, we can go to testing
Okay.
and finalize the schedule for next week.
So I'm happy to start with this. One of the things that I thought was important that came out of the Ward 3 vision conversation that speaks to the use of some of the questions in the Ron Eichner Ward 3 vision draft question that you, Lisa, a number of the questions that you adopted in your suggested questions, is an important thing to observe, and that is that there are a bunch of questions that come out of the Ward 3 vision draft that say, is this reasonable or unreasonable? And then asks the respondent to explain why they think it's reasonable or unreasonable. One of the things that came across powerfully in that conversation is that Ron is on tonight, and Tom, is it pronounced Higher, Ron?
Yes.
Yeah. Believed that the meat of those questions was in what people said in the open-ended response, not in so that the reasonable and unreasonable or unreasonable just set up the open-ended response. And we've talked a lot about open-ended responses, and I think there's a kind of consensus among us that we just don't have the staff to sort open-ended responses. And if that's true, then I'm concerned that just using the reasonable, unreasonable metric, it doesn't get us very far. Now, Ron, I think, is going to make the case that it's not so hard to sort the open-ended responses. Let's just say, and Ron, you're welcome to comment on that. I would just raise this question. Let's say we have really, really good response. We're just blue skying this, but we have 2,000 responses. How do we handle the open-ended portion of those questions?
Okay, I want to speak to that, Peter, because I did go through all the open-ended questions on the that survey. I can't remember the name of it, but the one I reviewed. And it took me a little bit of time, but I was able to sort the open-ended questions fairly effectively. It wasn't perfect. Someone else could have done it and come up a little different, but I don't think that different. But here would be, I think there's a compromise position maybe, because I do take their point that some of those questions could give us good information. We could limit the open-ended questions to maybe 2 or so. If we keep the number down, it makes it more workable. I will volunteer to go through and sort the open-ended questions in a certain way. If there are a couple of them, I can handle them. And I would say also, though, if we do the open-ended, we ought to have it still a definitive thing. Like, if it's height, some definite answer on height, and then allow for an open-ended, well, why do you feel that way? So then it's not only open-ended. I mean, there is, an easily sortable part to it.
Okay,
What do you think about, what do you all think about that kind of compromise?
This is a question for our consultants to help us on this, and to ask who actually is going to be tabulating these results. That's a threshold question. Are we doing it? Are we going to have some independent group do it? How are we going to do that?
No, that's the ANC's role. That would be us.
The
I think this is grunt work for us.
Well,
Yeah.
the ANC is the Royal ANC, right? I mean, the ANC could ask somebody to help us do that, or we could do it ourselves, or whatever.
I prefer the ANC to do it.
No.
We have always tabulated our survey information. Last time we had a lot of questions that were open-ended was the military road school. And it was myself, Connie Chain, and Michael Zeldin that primarily did the open-ended responses. So I do think that is our responsibility, and I do not want to put that in the hands of a third party.
No, I agree.
So let me just ask this question, though. In terms of our interviews with the 2 groups, we were focused primarily on the what. There were framing of questions that we were taking a look at as well. But in response to your question, Lisa, what did we learn? In terms of what Ward 3 Vision and Chevy Chase Voice had to tell us with respect to what was important to them that we asked about. I recall those conversations focused mostly on those issues, right? And Jim took pretty good notes. We've got notes from these meetings that he shared with everybody.
Okay, well, are we gonna try to finish the open-ended question issue that Peter raised, or not?
Yeah, definitely.
Let's go back to that.
Yes, can I suggest that we hear from Ron, and then Andrea Rosen raised her hand, and I assume relative to the reasonable, unreasonable, open-ended.
Okay.
So let's hear from the 2 of them, and we'll see if we can get a. And then you might want us to hear from Steve, who's on, of the 3 consultants, the only one who's on right now. So he might want us.
Well, my comment was that I think it's sort of a technical question that I'm incompetent to answer. Tom Heyer, who's experienced in these things, said that you can create word clouds with with these open-ended questions, and that's not difficult. I don't know, and that's informative. I don't know, but that's a way of dealing with it. The other thing is, one of the things we talked about at the interview was some of these open-ended questions can be turned into multiple choice, because it's not all that hard to guess what people's reactions to certain questions might be, the range of reactions.
Okay, so let's hear from Andrea, and then I just want to point out that we've gone back and forth on this a lot. I mean, Jim, I think it was the last meeting, we were quite categorical that we don't have the staff and we don't have the ability to do this, but maybe the 2 interviews.
Well, I rethought a little bit, but if we keep the number, I don't think we need to ask a lot of open-ended questions. We could focus on a couple of high priority ones. I think it could be doable, but.
Andrea, do you have, are you on?
Yeah, I'm on. So I did not memorize the Ward 3 Vision survey that I haven't seen. the most
God,
recent-
oh my God.
Okay, let me finish. Haven't seen the most recent version, but I've seen one from like June. And it struck me, first of all, I don't remember the question saying, is this reasonable or unreasonable? And defend your answer. What I remember it saying is, do you consider this reasonable? If not, why not? Which sort of puts the onus on the respondent to justify going against what is obviously a leading question. In other words, if you say it's not reasonable, then you're on the wrong side, and now you have to justify it. And I think it's an incredible mistake for the ANC to pretend that they can sit in judgment on the legitimacy of people's responses. This is, you should not care why people have a particular position. You should only care that that is what they believe. They don't have to justify themselves to you.
Okay. So let me just say, I think in at least the version we're working with, and versions have been a complicated issue in these both these interviews. In the version we're working with, it was reasonable or unreasonable, and be specific about your reasoning behind it, which I don't think suffers from the problem that you're raising. I mean, it may suffer from other problems, such as if we get 2,000 responses, what the hell we do with it, how we sort it out. But I mean, it doesn't
But-
kill against the person who picks unreasonable.
But what is it that
Right.
you're trying to get from people's responses? It's not like this is a college course and you have to write an essay defending your knowledge of a certain subject. What is it that you're looking for in the why or why not? Is this reasonable or unreasonable? I mean, what are you're trying to decide whose argument or whose thinking is more legitimate? Is that it? Or are you looking for people to
I
be
don't-
obvious racists or what? I just can't
Oh,
even
wow.
imagine why
And
this is
let me take a cut at that, but I don't want to get into a debate about this. I mean,
really why?
I think because we're trying to field a survey in a timely way, something that I think both you and Ward 3 and Chevy Chase Voice
Chevy Voice.
very much want us to do.
Yes.
So I think that the answer is that we're looking for where, if we can find it, there are areas of consensus, areas where we could build consensus, and so that taking a first cut of the universe to say you either think it's reasonable or unreasonable, and then asking people for some specifics, point out, would help us understand where, if at all, there are enough areas of agreement that we could come together on this.
Well, I have another answer to that. Let's say we ask a question about height and people say, I want a building that's low. And if we ask them, well, why do you want it low? And they say, well, I don't want the buildings nearby there to be in shadow. Then maybe there's a way to move the buildings to the center of the lot so they're not in shadow. In other words, some of these why questions can offer opportunities to address some of the opposition to some of the design elements, and that could shape our RFP. Does that answer? And that's not the why questions need not be tendentious. They can be pragmatic. Does that answer your question, Andrea?
I can see in that case that it could be useful, but and again, I haven't seen the most recent version of the Ward 3 Vision survey, but there were other kinds of questions that were more contentious where one was asked to support their answer.
All right. Well, can I say I'd like to give my take on one of the key differences that I saw in the two, and that is that Ward 3 Vision did not want to ask certain kinds of questions that they thought had been more or less decided. whereas the voice of Chevy, or a voice of Chevy Chase, Chevy, yeah, they did not take that approach. They wanted to ask questions. I'm thinking of affordable housing. And they wanted to ask that question, whereas Ward 3 Vision said that philosophically, Hire said he was opposed to that. But if you have to ask it, well, then here's how we can ask it.
I think
and
that's
I think that's an important issue that we as an ANC are going to have to decide, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Do we or don't we?
Yeah, I think that's a fundamental divide. And just so I put my stake in the ground on this, I think we have to ask the what we've called gating questions. I know there's a debate that says that a lot of the stuff has already been decided, but I think there's an argument that to be credible with the community, we have to ask the fundamental questions.
Well, and I don't think this is the time or place for us to have that debate, or is it, Lisa?
Yeah. Well, we are
Don't crash the car.
That's called putting you on the spot. I can't see your face.
Oh, hey, it's perfectly fine. I mean, we're definitely going to have the debate. I've said my stance on this. When it's come up, I don't mind asking the question because I'm not afraid of the response. But at the same time, I definitely understand, the side that says that, this is SAP's passed, small area plan has passed. And it's pretty fundamental what's in there. So I understand both sides of the issue. And I do think that, this is just me personally, it can be asked in a way that we, get the sentiment from the community. Now, I know some people have brought it up before too. Once we ask that question, what are we going to do with the response? And I think we have to be very straightforward in addressing that. And that's why I kind of, on my version of the questionnaire, had maybe 3 sections, including demographics and an explanation. I think we have to my suggestion is that if we ask that question, that we are very upfront at the beginning of that section, what we are using that information for, and how we're going to use it, including the section that where we talk about residential preference in terms of elements. So I think we can do it. I don't know if we want to have the debate now. We have to get these questions out of this committee. So we are going to have the debate. I do suggest that we have it, Jim, before you go abroad. So maybe that would be our next meeting, that we really dig in. Yeah, because these questions have to get out of the committee.
Okay, yeah, let's do that. So we as a committee will vote on it. And I think I see the way the vote's going to go, but I still want to have a little debate on it. And then whatever we decide is what happens, right? There's no time for this to go before the full ANC, right?
Well, my thought is to do a special meeting, because I do think it should go before the full ANC. And, us 4 are a majority, but I do think this is important enough that the entire commission needs to weigh in.
So guys, I'm a little lost here. There's an antecedent "it" that recurs in the conversation. What is the "it"?
What are you talking about, Bruce? What do you mean?
What are you guys talking about? I mean,
we're talking about whether or not to ask the question of affordable housing in the survey. The 2 groups we talked with have different views on that question.
Okay, well, but my take on the input from the 2 groups is that it's input. We've all agreed to that. It's important to get it, as it is to get other kinds of input. And then we kind of make up our minds on that. Jim,
And
am I-
that's what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
yeah,
That's what we're gonna
exactly what
do,
we're gonna
Bruce.
do.
Bruce, we're gonna do that at the next meeting. We're not gonna do it now. We're gonna talk about it in
Well-
depth at the next meeting.
okay, just,
Right.
Can I ask when the next meeting is? This is Steve Connor.
And then after the next meeting, Bruce, just to make sure we're all on the same page, what Jim
I'll be
was further asking is if the full ANC was going to weigh in on the questionnaire altogether.
Yeah,
And
I
so
got
my answer was, yeah, okay.
I got
So our next meeting, Steve, is next Tuesday.
okay, so Jim, just so I understand though, you are not in favor of asking a question about affordable housing, whether or not people prefer it, wish it to be there or whatever. Is that correct?
No, Bruce, that is not correct.
Okay, that's why I'm asking.
But what I am saying is we have a split decision from the two groups we talked with.
Yeah.
One group was philosophically, Mr. Heyer was philosophically opposed to asking it, although he said, if you have to ask it, you might ask it this way. And the other group was in favor of asking it. And I think it's an important question that we need to decide.
Yeah, okay, just to be clear, I respect the two groups. My barometer in this is not these two groups, and framing the conversation
Yeah.
around what one of them had to say and what the other one had to say is not the frame that I would approach this through, right?
Well, hold on, Bruce, we were asked by Lisa to report on, I actually think Jim picked the exact fundamental difference between our two interviews. I mean,
Yeah,
we were asked to report on these interviews, and indeed,
right.
this is about as fundamental a difference as you could get with these two
Right.
groups.
And that's what I've asked us to discuss tonight is the
Okay.
interviews and what's come out of that. So we do have kind of a barometer of what, and remember, I did not sit in on those groups and for very specific reasons, which I'll discuss at other point in time. But I do think amongst the, and you know, you can take notes and you could, you know, show people the notes, but having a discussion about where the two groups stand and what were the major differences of opinions and how they would like to see us proceed, I think is a worthy discussion. So this is all good.
So,
And I agree. I think, yeah, that
okay, there are two people, participants who want to speak. The first is Cal. Cal,
Yeah, so I'll be brief to this question. I have not seen or heard the wording of what was shown to the groups. And it's not that important that I know it right now, but it sort of almost sounds like a binary question. I want to keep reminding us not to ask, you know, this or that or yes or no questions like, you know, are you in favor of it or not favor of it? And I think to encapsulate what I've heard, I think what's important for us to know what's behind someone's take of whether something is something that is reasonable or not. That can help come up with solutions, because I think the overall thing here is to come up with solutions that work, that aren't just, you know, rolling over a big contingent of the community or something like that. But really, if we're trying to work towards solutions, just hearing that something is reasonable, unreasonable is not enough information to be able to use.
that's why I raised this issue at the outset, which is that I do think that if we're going to use the reasonable, unreasonable thing, we have to have the open-ended, or we have to have another way to do it, because it's a slightly smoothed over version of a binary question. So
I think it's the word why that is the sticking point. So let me, you know, I'll continue to think about wording that when the survey comes down to look at.
okay, good. Okay, tremendous. Michelle,
Huh? What?
who's that? Is that Michelle? You have your hand raised.
Lower your hand, Cal.
And come off mute, Michelle.
Sorry, I dropped off, guys. I'm back on.
Okay, but so Michelle, you're still muted, but you got your hand up. What do you want to do? Okay. I am asked to unmute. Okay, I'll click that.
Peter, can you rename me?
Oh, you came back on. Oh, yep. Okay, I don't know what, so if somebody else may want to pick up here,
Michelle just came
I
off
can't-
mute.
what's that?
Michelle just came off mute.
Michelle, are you there?
It
Hey.
might be something with her audio. She's off mute. She's
Connecting.
connecting to audio. it looks
Okay,
like.
guys,
Whoa, there you are.
can you
Okay.
hear me? Okay. Got muted and then I got kicked off the audio somehow. Okay. So the first thing I want to say with respect to the SAP has been passed. I've said, as I said at the last ANC meeting, I've been to virtually every ANC meeting for the last 3 years on this. I begged you to reach out to the community. The problem with just saying, well, the SAP has been passed, so housing's going to happen. The community never had a voice. Okay, this, as I've said a million times, this survey should have been done 2 years ago. And to now just say, well, we have the SAP, so too bad. And let me say, of course, Ward 3 Vision does not want you to ask about housing. They were successful in getting the former ANC chair to push this through the ANC with the help of some other ANC members, and they never went to the community, and it was purposeful. You see that now when the Ward 3 Vision first question is, what do we do if people say they don't want affordable housing? And then this big push by Ward 3 Vision and others to say, don't ask about housing. And whatever reasons they give, it is not right. If you don't ask about it, you will be giving this community the back of your hand and just saying, we are just going to ignore you. Too bad. We successfully ignored you the first time around, and we're going to do it the second time around.
Okay.
And I'm telling you, people are not happy about this.
Okay.
And then you're starting to say something about asking about reasonableness of questions. I have seen the Ward 3 Vision survey, and I remember seeing some questions about, is this reasonable? Does this sound reasonable to you? If not, why not? Oh my God, how biased is that? If you don't agree with us, please give us a justification. So I hope that's not where you're heading with this. Okay.
Can I, let's again, and I did this during the interviews. I mean, ultimately, aim here is to work up a set of questions and test them, put them out to the community. So, Ron, if you don't, I don't want to regurgitate the debate between the various sides so that we can possibly avoid it.
That's not my intention. I just want to say, just to make clear, this is not a hill that Ward 3 Vision wants to die on. If we want to ask questions about the community's reluctance or acceptance of affordable housing, great. Let's go for it. The caveat being, as I mentioned in the interviews, we want to make sure that we know what we're going to do with that information, and what's what's reasonable. And as far as the way these questions were written, we are not survey people. We think we hit all the substantive issues, and we welcome somebody who writes better surveys that aren't biased or whatever the complaint is. We welcome people to Steve and Susan and company to have at it and modify all those questions.
So just so you know that I'm not like sticking you out there to like shoot you down. the reason I raised this issue is that in fact, Lisa, in her draft questions, used some of your formulation, but per our previous conversations, whacked off the, if you say one thing or the other, what you're thinking. Because we are concerned that open-ended questions are very difficult to deal with. But so all I was raising this, I was pointing out that one of the things in the interview with the Ward 3 Vision people is they said the real meat of the matter is in the what people say at that point. And and so that if we're going to use that formulation of a question, not if we're going to use, if we're going to touch the subject or not, but if we're going to use the reasonable, unreasonable, we have to have, we really have to have the open-ended part. So that's all that. Okay, where do we want to go from here?
Bruce, did you have something you want to add?
Well, no, I was just going to point out that in the Ward 3 Vision survey, there is a question that is a kind of gating question. That, do you support affordable housing at the site? They have 5 different response categories. It's there. It's down in the survey. It's not the first question up. But that question is a question that I believe in the conversation we had with Chevy Chase Voice folks was a question that in different words, perhaps they too would want to ask.
Yeah.
Right.
I also remember from the conversations that the structure of a question around you have 10 points, assign it to community center, library, affordable housing, open space, green space, that Chevy Chase Voice in that conversation, Andrea, correct me if I'm wrong, thought that might also be acceptable. But I, again, want to look at this in terms of this input is fantastic. We've got it. We're using it. It addresses, and the question we're asking is, what do we need to know from our community?
Right.
What do we need to be asking people? And I think we're agreeing we do need to allow people, and Jim may have a different view on this, which we can talk about later. We do need to give people the opportunity to say that what is on the table is acceptable or not to them, not a yes, no, to Cal's point, but in the various response categories that we've already developed. I put a question like that in my draft survey. I also did a formulation around the 10 points to deepen a bit on that question, because I do think it gives people another opportunity to express their views on what they want at the site. And so, yeah, I think that's good input. I just wanted to be clear. It's already in the surveys, right? They've already got it.
I think I just say, try and go back to what Lisa asked at the beginning, which is a report. I think the other thing that was true of the Ward 3 Vision interview was we talked, I don't think at all, and Jim and Bruce, correct me if I'm wrong, about all the early questions in the Ward 3 Vision draft. It asked a lot of questions about, how much do you know? And I was pleased to see that we didn't talk about that, because I don't think that is very useful. I think that is basically, well, if you don't know much, I mean, I'm worried that including a lot of those questions, besides just taking up time, will make people say, well, I'm stupid on this issue, so I'm either not going to complete the survey, or I don't care what the information is. So I mean, I'm glad we're going to lose those, and I think that because I don't think they serve much purpose. And
okay, here's another difference that I found between the two. The Ward 3 Vision, when they talked about programs or programmatic questions or activities, they said they wanted to focus on the programmatic activities outside the library and community center in the open green space, because the people in those facilities will have more input onto the programs. And I think that the people in Chevy Chase Voice wanted to ask questions about programs inside the buildings as well. Does that ring a
I don't
bell?
think that's true.
Oh, you don't want to
no.
ask questions about what goes
Um,
on inside?
They were more like spatial relationship interior questions and not so much programmatic. I mean,
Okay.
it is true that one of the people on the interview has a long experience with programmatic things at the Chevy Chase Commons. She did bring that up, but it is not really on the survey.
Okay, well, so then we have some agreement, at least with these two groups, to focus programmatic questions on outdoor activities. Is that correct?
I would guess that's correct.
I actually thought that Tom Heyer with Ward 3 Vision, what the hell was that?
Are you okay, Peter?
I'm under cannon attack here. I thought that Tom Heyer's formulation was not a bad one, which is he said that, look, you're trying to come up with a strategy for the entire site. The truth of the matter is that the public library system and Department of Parks and Recreation are going to do their own community input
Right.
policies focused on what goes on in their respective facilities. You know, if suddenly I blow up, I mean, I love you all, and it's me.
We'll miss you, Peter. But I want to correct what I said, because Ron also said he did want some questions about what goes on in the first floor of these buildings, whether it's retail or something like a shopping mall for community services. So that's inside. He wanted some questions on what will the first floor look like?
Yeah, I think the demarcation line is, does it require a brick and mortar, a physical change, to accommodate or not? I mean, if there's if it's a requirement for a meeting room, and the meeting room could be used for Pilates or a community meeting, it's a meeting room. So, Lisa, let's see, Andrea and Michelle both have their hand up. Are we going another round, or do you want?
Yeah, no, we can do that.
Okay.
I don't know who had their hand up first, Andrea or Michelle.
I think I did.
Okay, go on.
Okay. I just wanted to say, with regard to the question about housing on the Civic Core, I don't think it should be phrased as, do you support affordable housing on the Civic Core? Because the likelihood is that most of the housing will be market rate. It seems to me more germane or more accurate to say, do you support housing, some of which will be affordable on the Civic Core? Because I think that it throws a different cast on the type of housing if you refer to it as if it is all affordable, or if you were to say, do you support luxury housing on the Civic Core? So it seems to me that describing what it is, if we actually knew a percentage, we could use that, but describing what it is when you ask about housing would be the fair way to do it.
Okay, Michelle, then Ron Eichner.
Okay, and I actually had that same reaction as Andrea, but that's not why I raised my hand. Yeah, to just say affordable is a little misleading, because it will in all likelihood be a majority market rate expensive. But what I was going to say, and I know I'm just sort of, it's probably already been decided since you met with Ward 3 Vision, but I can't help but be a little concerned with this idea that was bandied about several meetings ago, that of Ward 3 Vision as a stakeholder in this. And, they are an advocacy group, an advocacy group that has advocated for as dense development as they can get all over Ward 3, long before they were talking about affordable housing. That came much later. But in any event, they have had enormous influence throughout this process, throughout this small area plan. And again, with the help of the former ANC chair and certain other ANC members, they've kind of driven the show here. And I just am a little troubled to see this continuing. They certainly have a right to voice their opinion, obviously. They have a right to do a survey. But, to give them such weight and such importance when the community has been left out. And I don't think a lot of people in the community really agree with the Ward 3 vision. So that's all I want to say on that. Okay.
You understand,
Peter,
Michelle, you
go
do
on.
understand we met with both Ward 3 Vision and Chevy Chase Voice, yes?
Yeah. I know, but it's, there's still, yes, and that's great. But, there's still sort of, now one of two main players. And, at least what we are theoretically representing a large portion of the community. But hey, you can knock us out too if you all want to come out with a fair thing on your own. But like I said, whatever. I'm just troubled by all the influence they have had from day one.
Okay, let's
That's
not.
all.
I'm not going to address that, but I did want to address what Andrea said. And one of the reasons why I think we should, as much as we can, find a way to push affordable housing in this as opposed to market rate is, the example through our RFP process for the Hebrew home, the community said they wanted more than the 30% minimum that the district was required, and they ended up getting like 80% affordable. So there is there's an opportunity, and we can wordsmith it however is necessary to make everybody comfortable, but it would be really nice if the community, if they want more than the 30% minimum that we ask for.
Well, perhaps then that can be a separate question, or it can be a subset of the question. I mean, the zoning that OP or DEMPED plans to ask for at that site is IZ plus, and that maxes out at 20% affordable housing in the 50 to 80% MFI.
Well, I think that in district land, there's a practice of it being 30% minimum.
Well, no, it's only 30% minimum if you're within a half mile of a metro station or adjacent to a priority bus route, which we're not.
I think that's
Otherwise, it's
right
20%.
on that. I've always worried about this priority bus route thing because I think
That's Wisconsin Avenue.
Connecticut Avenue was demoted from being a priority bus route. So
For
It's
sure.
It's Wisconsin Avenue, anyway.
right.
Yeah, and I actually read in the city paper on an article a couple of years ago that if they surplus, if they sell the land, then it's 30% required. If they lease it, there's no requirement. And
Really?
it sounds like they're mostly talking about leasing it. DC can ask for however much affordable, but it's not a requirement.
But can I look? We're going back to the substance of this debate, which we're trying. I mean, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see if we could stay on questions. Lisa, do you feel like you got a report on these two interviews?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is helpful, even though we're veering a little bit, but there's definitely some commonalities that we can point to, but there are some stark differences. But I do think it's very helpful to have this preliminary discussion between us on what was said during the interview process. So with that, I do want to go back to what Bruce brought up regarding timeline on, Bruce, you were talking about the testing, which you asked in the beginning. You want to go back to that?
Sure. Yeah. I just think that we can ask the consultants to do a plan for the testing. That would include the sample size. That would include the method of testing, you know, just the basic parameters of how we propose to do it so that the committee and the commission are comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And then once we have our draft survey, then of course we implement it and run the test for a week or so, or whatever we feel we have time for. We had said initially it'd be a week. So that's the long and short of it.
Okay. I don't have an issue with that. Commissioners, are you guys okay with that? To get that testing plan from the consultants?
How are we going to come up with a final draft survey?
So
Yeah.
let me address that. I do think that before the next meeting, the homework, Jim, you always get to the end of meetings and say, what's my homework? So, so let me see if I can have an answer this time.
Always the students.
I do think that this is a case where we have to take Bruce's, Lisa's, mine, Chevy Chase Voices, Ward 3 Visions. We need to each sit down and see if we can work through, so we both get our headings. We have an agreement about headings. We have an agreement about the subject of the questions. The exact wording is going to be, I think we ought to come to next meeting with kind of our positions clear on wording, and then, you know, hash it out for our during the meeting to see if we could actually wordsmith to close to at least to testable questions.
Yeah.
So,
and I think the easiest way, I mean, for me, you guys can let me know if you disagree, but for me, the easiest way, and I'm glad, Bruce, you sent your questions, because I think we can, you know, like I had said before, start combining. I mean, there's a lot of questions on affordable housing. There's questions on density. So everyone has pretty much touched on certain, you know, areas. We can group that together, and that's going to give us a basis to kind of see what our headers are. And even going back, we need to go back to even, you know, I think we pretty much have 99% finalized demographics, but we need to start putting it in what is going to pretty much look like a final format. For me, it's easier to have everything that's related to one particular topic in one particular section. And then I could go through that section and be like, oh, okay, here's definitely what I don't like. Here's what I do like. Here's what I can compromise on. And then we can maybe start from there to just kind of start at least whittling some of this information down. But I think a lot of the, you know, kind of like what Peter was saying, we're going to have to do a lot of that before we get to Tuesday's meeting, so that when we come to the meeting on Tuesday, we have sort of a document that we're working from, as opposed to everybody working off of individual copies and different thoughts. So a lot of this discussion we can do off of email. You know, I mean, but just between today and Tuesday, we're going to have to really dig in and get this hammered out.
So here, this is something that would be helpful for me, Lisa, if you are agree to do it or feel like you can, is if you could just send me the major topics, the headings under which these questions fall according to the way you see it.
Okay.
And then I think I'm okay with working from that, and then I'll group the different questions under that, and I think that'll save me some time, and I don't want to get into a fight about topics because I think we all agree on that anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
So by topics, I mean, there's a section on demographics.
Right.
Then there'll be a section on something about affordable housing. There'll be something on density. There'll be something on programs, indoor, outdoor, that sort of thing. And And if you could just send that to me, just the topic, main heading areas, I'll get to work. And then if I think that you left out a topic, I'll add that, or, whatever. But
Okay.
So guys, a couple of thoughts here. First of all, it would be great for Steve to weigh in on this. We need to be thinking now about how we bring the consultants into this phase of the process, which we've indicated that we would do to help us in terms of question wording, obviously, but also the structure of the survey. When we're talking about,
Bruce, so I understand, isn't the thing you sent us the consultant vetted version?
Peter, that's my version that I chatted and consulted with the consultants about, but all of you are welcome to talk with them about your questions. But if we're at a point now where we want to bring all the questions together as we're talking about, then it would be great to have them be part of the process. Let me just finish the thought, though, on the question sections and whatnot. If we're talking about a survey that has 10 or 12 questions, we're not talking about too many sections, right? We're talking about
Right.
Right.
Yeah, my draft has, I think, 3 major sections. One is demographics, one is relating to affordable housing, and then one is relating to elements. So I can, and then under that, so like say under affordable housing, I think, maybe the gating questions, some of that stuff is under there. Under elements, density, lot coverage, programming, that type of stuff.
Okay.
So I can just, I can send you guys my way of how I think we can organize it, and then we can hash it out from there. And I don't mind including the consultants on that at all.
Right.
And I
So
think
the one thing
Nash is asking for the headings, so we have some buckets to put stuff in, not, so it's.
Yeah.
Right. That's the way I see it. And
Yeah.
and we can, if one of us thinks that there's a missing bucket from what Lisa sends, then, we can talk about that too at the meeting.
We're not having a-
you're really talking here in some instances about a bucket for one question, but in any
Yeah, yeah.
Right, but we got a lot of versions of that one question, right? I mean,
Right.
all right.
Yes.
But the thing that I would ask us to do would be to take a look at the work we've done, take a look at the work that others have done, and come back to the basic 2 objectives we have and further identify now the what. What do we need to know relative to the 2 objectives we have, so that we can be very clear that we're getting the information we need from the survey. I just suggest that as a kind of a guidepost when we start looking at all kinds of different questions. It could be very helpful.
Exactly. And this is Steve. And to get the information that we want to get, we all agree on, and that can be transferred quickly, analyzed quickly. We don't have much time here. We're already running behind schedule, in my opinion. So we need to kind of agree on a basic set of questions that gets the the feel of the neighborhood on this issue. And I know there were some folks who were saying that, when the final designs get produced, I mean, my opinion is we could do another survey with the images and the questions about that and what do you prefer, but we need to get people's real feelings on this issue for that site. And we have a limited amount of time, and we don't need to ask a zillion questions. I think we can get to that pretty quickly, and we got to check it out, and we got to run it and test it a little bit, and then run with it. And it's I missed the first 7 or 8 minutes of the reasonableness and unreasonableness of the questions, so I kind of missed that whole point. And it was my understanding from a couple meetings ago that we don't have the staff that can analyze that and do that. And now I think Lisa or Peter said that the ANC is going to do that. So
all right. Well,
depending on
speaking of time, it's now 8 o'clock, and I feel clear about my homework. And so I don't know that we need to continue the meeting any more from my point of view.
Thank you, Jim.
No, we're done.
Okay.
I'm hungry.
Jim has spoke. Yeah,
I
Jim
am.
has
I'm
spoken.
hungry.
Yeah, okay, no, Jim is exactly right, it's 8 o'clock, and I do like to keep the meetings to, an hour. But let me just say in, wrapping up that I do think we have our homework. I'm open, I travel back to DC tomorrow. My Thursday is, I'm really tied up Thursday through Saturday. But if anybody wants to meet, grab coffee on Sunday, commissioners, I'm more than willing to do that. I think I'm pretty open on Monday as well. Maybe face to face might help some of us out to noodle through this.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be
for
back
the-
until, I'm not gonna be back until just before Labor Day.
Oh, okay, cool.
A
But,
lot of painting to do up here, a lot of bedrooms to paint, a lot of, so.
That's fine. Thank you for the community members that continue to show up and opine. Please don't think, I know there's a lot of distrust in the community of this process, and in some cases, the ANC. I do not want people to feel that one group is weighing in over the other. We are strongly listening to the feedback of everyone that has weighed in, including individuals that have sent us a ton of emails, a ton of messages on the ANC feedback forum. So we have heard from a lot of people, and we're going to continue to listen as we draft this survey and hopefully get the sentiment of the community. So with that said, we'll adjourn. It is 8:01. And we will meet again next Tuesday, and it's the same Zoom link. So everybody should have that. We have the same Zoom link that we'll be using.
Okay, so I click stop video, is that right?
Yeah, hit stop
Yeah.
video.
And send it to me, Peter.
No.
and I'll
Oh,
post
well,
it.
hold it. Somebody should send it. I don't know where it is. That should be on the
Stop
site.
recording, not stop video.
Oh,
stop
well,
recording. That's something else.
if somebody sends it to me, I'll post it.
Where is stop recording?
If you're the host, is it? Me?
Down in the middle,
should-
Peter, on the record.
Yeah, it should be down. Oh, I got it, Peter.
Okay, good.
Where are
got
the
it.
great